Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The steam curled lazily around the edges of the half-filled bathtub, wrapping me in a warm, private haze. My fingers traced the rim of the water absent-mindedly, but my thoughts weren't on the bath, they were on him. He stood there, just inside the doorway, silent and still. I could feel the weight of his gaze even without looking, a quiet heat that made my heartbeat stutter. My hand slipped, almost unconsciously, tracing a delicate path down my skin. I pretended not to notice him, even though I could sense his sharp inhale and the subtle shift in his stance. Every brush of water against my skin seemed louder in that charged silence, as if the room itself was holding its breath. His eyes met mine, a long, lingering look that felt like a dare and a promise at the same time. There was a playful smirk tugging at the corner of his lips, the kind that made me question if I should stop pretending or let him see how aware I really was. My pulse quickened, and the steam around us seemed to thicken, cocooning us in a private world where every glance and subtle movement was electric. I leaned back into the water, trying to steady my breathing, but the closeness, the unspoken tension, made my senses sharp. I could hear the faint scrape of his sock on the tile, feel the heat radiating from his body even at a distance. My fingers hesitated for a fraction of a second, then resumed their slow, teasing rhythm, just enough to make him notice, just enough to make the air between us sizzle. Then, without a word, he stepped closer, his presence pressing against the doorframe. I couldn't tell if it was boldness or curiosity that drove him, but every nerve in my body thrummed with anticipation. And just like that, the moment hung suspended, delicate, daring, and unbearably tense, leaving me wondering how far this silent game would go. Even as the water lapped gently around me, my mind wandered back to the nights we used to spend tangled in easy laughter and whispered secrets. Back then, our closeness had been effortless, carefree touches and playful teasing that never carried this weight of restraint. Lately, though, cracks had begun to appear, subtle but undeniable. He'd come home late, excuses always ready, and I'd sense the quiet distance in his eyes. Yet in moments like this, when the world narrowed down to just the two of us, all that distance seemed to evaporate, leaving behind an electric pull I could neither ignore nor fully trust. I watched him shift in the doorway, shoulders tense, jaw tight. There was something unsaid in the line of his lips, a hesitation I wanted to understand but feared would unravel too much. My pulse still raced from our shared glance, but it was now mixed with something deeper, curiosity, fear, and an ache I hadn't admitted to myself. How long had we been skirting the edges of desire, pretending these stolen moments were innocent when they weren't? The memory of a stolen touch from last week flashed across my mind, a hand brushing mine while reaching for a coffee mug, the lingering warmth that neither of us acknowledged afterward. Those tiny sparks had grown, igniting a slow burn neither of us could resist, yet both of us seemed determined to deny. And now, standing here, half-shrouded in steam, I could feel that fire threatening to leap across the fragile distance between us. I tried to focus on the warm water against my skin, letting it calm my racing thoughts, but every subtle movement he made reminded me of what we were dancing around. A cough, the scrape of his foot, the faint scent of him in the air, it all pulled me in, teasing and tormenting at the same time. I could sense him measuring his steps, his eyes not leaving mine, reading me like I had always wanted him to. This room had become a silent confessional, a place where we revealed more through glances than words. And yet, the tension wasn't just physical, it was emotional, charged with all the things we hadn't said, the truths we were too scared to voice. I wondered if he felt the same storm swirling inside me, the longing mixed with fear, the thrill of closeness tinged with uncertainty. It was maddening, intoxicating, and utterly unavoidable. As I leaned back, letting the warm water envelop me, I realized that we were teetering on a precipice, one small move, one subtle acknowledgement, and everything between us could either ignite or shatter. And in that suspended moment, where anticipation met hesitation, I couldn't tell whether I was terrified or exhilarated. Maybe both. The silence between us had grown heavy, thick with the things we hadn't said but both felt. I could sense him shifting, a subtle tightening in his posture, and I knew it wasn't just the steam making the room warmer. It was me, my presence, my gaze, the way I didn't look away. Every second stretched, taut with unspoken desire, and yet there was an edge of something darker, jealousy. He wasn't usually possessive, but today there was a flicker in his eyes, a sharp, almost imperceptible spark that made my pulse race. Had he noticed the way I'd laughed at someone else earlier, or was it simply the magnetism of this charged moment that had awakened it? Whatever it was, it drew him closer, narrowing the invisible distance between us. I felt the heat of his gaze brush over me like a caress, teasing and relentless, igniting a fire I hadn't realized had been smoldering. I tried to focus on the warm water, on the soft scent of steam and lavender soap, but it was impossible. Every subtle shift of his weight, every glance, made me conscious of the space between us. The tension was almost unbearable, a mix of temptation and restraint, and I realized how dangerously close we were to crossing lines we both feared to acknowledge. A laugh, low and nervous, escaped me. He mirrored it with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, a grin that promised mischief and challenge in equal measure. The playful teasing of before had morphed into something deeper, something sharper. My chest tightened, my thoughts scattered, yet a part of me craved it, the thrill of testing boundaries, the intoxication of forbidden longing. He took a step closer, and the doorway seemed smaller, the space charged with possibility. I could feel his presence brushing against me without touching, and the ache of anticipation twisted my stomach. Our eyes locked, speaking in a language neither of us dared to voice aloud, and for a moment, I wondered how long we could maintain this delicate balance before it all tipped into something undeniable. And then, just as I felt the suspense reach its peak, the sound of a distant knock shattered the bubble around us, leaving us suspended between desire and reality, both unwilling and unable to act, yet craving what might happen next. The house had finally quieted down. Every footstep, every creak of the floorboards seemed louder now, amplifying the thrum of anticipation in my chest. I found myself in the dimly lit hallway, water still dripping from my hair, wrapped in nothing but a towel, yet the heat wasn't from the bath, it was from him. He lingered near the doorway, eyes dark with something I couldn't name, a dangerous mixture of desire, curiosity, and unspoken longing. I tried to keep my movements casual, adjusting the towel with deliberate slowness, pretending the tension didn't make my pulse race. But it was impossible to ignore. Every subtle glance, every shift of his weight, pulled me closer to the edge of something forbidden. The air between us vibrated, thick with all the words neither of us dared to say. We were alone, the house holding its breath around us. The distance that had always existed, the polite spaces, the careful avoidance, had vanished, leaving nothing but this crackling energy that drew us in like magnets. My chest tightened when he stepped a fraction closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, yet far enough that propriety still held us back. A laugh escaped him, soft and teasing, but his eyes didn't smile. It was a challenge, a daring spark that made me shiver with anticipation. I wanted to retreat, to remind myself of the lines we couldn't cross, but every fiber of me wanted to lean into it, to see how far the tension could take us. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, my own gaze locked on his, wide with surprise and desire, hair wet and clinging to my neck, lips parted as if waiting for permission. And in that frozen moment, I realized we were past hesitation. The closeness, the suppressed longing, the hours of stolen glances, it had all led here. Then, just as he took another step, our hands almost brushing, the distant creak of the front door opening shattered the spell. My breath caught in my throat. Someone else was home. The world intruded, leaving us teetering on the precipice of everything we had been holding back. And in that suspended, impossible moment, I couldn't tell if we would retreat or finally give in. The front door had slammed moments ago, the sound echoing through the hallway and sending a jolt through my chest. He froze, tension rippling across his face, and I realized it wasn't just the intruder that startled him, it was the fear of being caught, of exposing the truth we had been dancing around for weeks. My towel was still wrapped tightly around me, but the warmth of the moment lingered, my pulse racing from proximity and anticipation. He stepped closer, urgency in every movement, eyes searching mine as if willing me to understand something he couldn't say aloud. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, voice trembling, not fully understanding myself, but needing to hear him confess. He hesitated, jaw tightening, before the words finally spilled out. "Because I didn't know how," he admitted. "I've been wanting to say something for weeks. I didn't want to ruin us, but I can't ignore it anymore." His gaze held mine, steady and raw, revealing a vulnerability I hadn't expected. A strange mix of relief and shock flooded me. This wasn't just tension, it was truth laid bare, a hidden desire finally uncovered. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, both terrified and exhilarated by the honesty we had kept from each other. For weeks, we had tiptoed around emotions too potent to name, yet here it was, undeniable and stark in the half-light of the hallway. Then, just as I reached to speak, a familiar voice called from the living room. "I didn't expect you to be home so soon." My stomach dropped. A friend, or worse, someone else who knew us, was standing there, witnessing the fragile moment between us. His eyes met mine again, a flicker of fear and mischief. "We need to talk, later," he murmured, as the intruder stepped closer. The words carried urgency, secrecy, and unspoken promise. The air between us crackled, not with intimacy, but with a suspenseful, almost forbidden energy. For a moment, the room felt suspended, time stretching. The secret we'd kept, the desire we denied, the risk of being discovered, it all collided in a heartbeat. I realized that whatever happened next, our relationship could never be the same. The attraction, the tension, and the confessions had reached a tipping point, leaving us on the edge of something irreversible. And then the moment shattered as the intruder's eyes widened, recognizing the charged tension, leaving us both caught between exposure and the dangerous thrill of what had just begun. The tension in the hallway had broken, but the aftermath was deafening in its silence. The intruder had retreated, leaving a charged emptiness that echoed with all the confessions we had just exchanged. I wrapped the towel tighter around myself, heart still hammering, knowing that the moment we had been skirting now demanded acknowledgement, choices had to be faced, emotions reckoned with. He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes searching mine for a sign of forgiveness, understanding, or perhaps courage. "I shouldn't have waited so long," he admitted, voice low and raw. "I was scared of what it might mean, scared of losing you if I messed up." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening as the weight of his honesty pressed down on me. I had been scared too, scared of vulnerability, scared of the undeniable pull between us, and scared that letting him in completely might change everything we had built. And yet, now, standing in this moment, I realized we had already crossed that line. The secret tension, the unspoken longing, it had forced our hearts into confrontation, whether we were ready or not. "You weren't alone in this," I confessed, feeling the words tremble out of me. "I've felt the same way, but I didn't know how to say it without breaking something." My voice caught, and I could see the relief mixed with fear flicker across his face. We were no longer dancing around the edges of our emotions. The hallway, dimly lit and quiet, became a stage for truth. Step by step, our distance closed, driven not by desire alone, but by shared acknowledgement of everything we had denied. Every glance, every subtle movement, was filled with the energy of confession, remorse, and longing all at once. He reached out, hesitating only for a moment before letting his fingers brush mine. That single touch carried all the weight of our pent-up emotions, the apologies, the temptations, the secrets we had kept, and the promises we now dared to make. The world outside the door, the interruption, and the past missteps faded into the background, leaving only the two of us suspended in this fragile, yet powerful, connection. And as we stood there, trembling with emotion yet grounded by the honesty we finally shared, it was clear that the storm had passed, but the aftermath would shape everything we did next. The confrontation had ended, the tension resolved, and yet a quiet, electrifying energy lingered, hinting at a closeness that was still growing, still alive, and waiting for the next moment to fully ignite. The tension that had haunted us for weeks seemed to melt away in the soft glow of the hallway light. His fingers lingered against mine, hesitant at first, then steady, as if tracing the outline of every unspoken feeling between us. I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the bath or the summer air. This was the warmth of understanding, of trust, of finally allowing ourselves to be seen. "I've wanted this for so long," he whispered, voice barely more than a breath, and I felt a shiver of relief ripple through me. Us, finally being honest. I smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that had been absent for too long. "Me too," I admitted, letting the vulnerability show. The walls we had built around our hearts, the fears, the misunderstandings, the hesitation, had crumbled in the quiet aftermath of confession. And in their place was something new, a connection that was daring, tender, and undeniably real. He stepped closer, still mindful of the gentle distance, yet closer than either of us had dared before. Our hands met fully this time, fingers interlacing naturally, as if they had always known how to fit together. I rested my forehead against his, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my own, a rhythm that spoke louder than any words ever could. "I promise, no more hiding," he murmured, brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." The simplicity of the words struck me, the truth, the honesty, the quiet intimacy of two people choosing each other after fear and tension had threatened to pull them apart. I laughed softly, a light, relieved sound, and he mirrored it, warmth spreading between us like sunlight breaking through clouds. And in that small, sacred moment, the world outside ceased to matter. No interruptions, no past mistakes, no lingering doubts, just the two of us, holding space for each other, hearts aligned in a way that felt both fragile and unbreakable. As we lingered in that embrace, I realized that all the stolen glances, the tension, the secrets we had carried, had led to this, a moment of quiet perfection, where desire and affection met in a safe, unshakable bond. And even as the night drew on, we remained there, connected, knowing that the journey ahead would be shared, honest, and filled with the tender promise of love finally allowed to flourish. 3.